Today's episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast is brought to you by Port Richards Cafe, TechSense Senior Residential Care Homes, ATD Painting, and Performance Food Group. Port Richards Cafe, Plano's oldest restaurant since 1973. They are open daily from 5:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m., serving the three most important meals of the day: breakfast, lunch, and dessert. It is true Texas home-style cooking made with love and grit. That is Port Richards Cafe, located off of Avenue K in Plano. TechSense Senior Residential Care Homes, senior care at its best with a family atmosphere. They specialize in making their facilities as close to a home living experience as possible. Not only that, there are no move-in fees and there are no visitation restrictions. They are located near I-635 in Marsh Lane in Dallas, right near Carrollton. For more information, you can call 469-400-7650. That is TechSense Senior Residential Care Homes. And now, let's podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. My name is Matt Welch. I'm the sports editor at Star Local Media, and I am being joined by Justin Thomas and Taylor Ragland. On today's podcast, we're going to dip our toes a little bit more into the basketball waters, talk a little bit of kind of some early impressions on the boys basketball scene in our neck of the woods. Plus, we have an interview with one of the top players in the entire country. But first, at the very least, for one more week, we got a football game to preview, and we are down to the Final Four of the high school football postseason. It is state semifinal week, and yes, we have one more team left in our coverage area that is still kicking, Allen. So let's talk, which should be a big one on Saturday, 4 o'clock, AT&T Stadium, Allen versus Duncanville, a matchup that I think has kind of been in the works for all season long. You kind of, when folks at the beginning of the year were laying out their preseason predictions and who the favorites were in each region, you kind of had an inkling that it could very well be Duncanville versus Allen in the state semis. And I think after the way that this past week went, with the way that those two dispatched of their respective state quarterfinal opponents, the buzz for this one is just through the roof.
Yep.
So let's dig into this matchup a little bit. I mean, if I'm, on paper, a lot of similarities between these two teams as far as just how they've taken care of business. It has been very, very dominating, no matter which way you look at it. As far as just the head-to-head, I mean, some team is going to be put in a situation that they frankly haven't been in all season to an extent. Obviously, the big storyline in this is, at least from the Allen perspective, can they be the team to crack the code against what is looking like the 85 Bears equivalent of high school football defenses? I mean, some of the numbers on what this Duncanville defense has done this year are just insane. Now, I know that I'm sure the diehards out in Allen, the ones who are not just Allen fans but just general high school football fans, are probably aware of what Duncanville has on defense. But for folks who are just now this week getting up to speed on just what is in store for the Eagles on Saturday out in Arlington, here's just some cursory information, just some backstory on this Duncanville defense. On the year, understand this is a 13-game sample size now, so to date, Duncanville has allowed 4.6 points per game. That's right, 4.6. So by scoring a touchdown, that's considered an above-average performance against the Duncanville defense. Yardage-wise, 130.5 yards allowed. 130.5. 107.6 passing, 22.8 rushing. It's ridiculous. I mean, that's just, I don't even know how do you make it this far into the season with those kind of averages?
Yeah, well, and then the playoff average too, right? I mean, on the season it's what, 4.6 or whatever you said, but in the playoffs it's 6.7, I think. Yeah. And those are increasing in difficulty every week.
It was crazy because when I covered that Lewisville game, it was like Lewisville had one pretty solid drive in the first half, and they moved down there, and you're like, oh man, this is they just went 60 yards. This is the best game that anybody's had against the Duncanville defense so far. And it's because they had a good drive. And
that's what it takes.
Territory of having the best game against them.
I mean, their season highs in yardage allowed. They haven't allowed an opponent over 300 yards yet. South Lake Carroll got close, got 294, but they've held two opponents to negative yardage. W.T. White and Molina, one had -5, the other had -3. Yeah. They've pitched 6 shutouts. They've held an opponent to single-digit scoring in 11 games. Only Shreveport, Evansville, Evangel out of Louisiana, and South Grand Prairie have gotten into double digits. South Grand Prairie with a season-high 14 points scored against Duncanville. So, yes, this is a defense that is performing in a very, you just don't see a unit that excels quite like this. It comes along very...
I think it was the full season. It might be the playoffs, but I think it was the full season that they've scored more defensive touchdowns than they've allowed touchdowns.
Wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, they've allowed 8 touchdowns on the season, and they have 12 defensive touchdowns, 8 being pick sixes. So yes, and I mean, you dig even deeper into those numbers, you'll come across things like they haven't allowed a single point in the third quarter this season. So if we're just looking at from Allen's standpoint, that basically says you have to be leading at the half.
Well, yeah. And that's uncomfortable for Allen because we talk about it all season long. Allen never loses the second half because they're so deep. They just continue to play. They don't wear out the same way other teams do, especially in the trenches. Allen never loses the second half, but they might finally run into somebody that can be there in the second half with them and potentially, like you said, if they're not leading at halftime, win a second half and win a football game. And that's a spot, you mentioned one team or the other kind of being out of their comfort zone. That's a spot that Allen is extremely unfamiliar with.
Because even in defeat, like even in their losses, their only 2 losses since, October 2012 against the Woodlands, against Westlake, they were down big early. They eventually lost those games, but they were able to win the second half, rally back to within 1 score in both contests. But yeah, I mean, let's see. I'm just thinking, like, from the Allen standpoint, what the big thing in this game is obviously what resistance is Allen going to be able to show against this Duncanville defense, and I think it all starts up front, and that's kind of the big subplot heading into this one because for all the buzz that Duncanville's defense gets, specifically their front four, and just the job that they do, getting pressure on opposing quarterbacks, Allen's offensive line has traditionally been among the best in the state. It is the positional group that I think has been the most consistent and the most dominating throughout just the run of Allen. I mean, dating all the way back to the late 2000s. Allen, it was just death taxes and Allen having a great offensive line. And it's still a good one this year, no doubt. It could be shorthanded, though, on Saturday because they lost 2 starters to injury against Waco Midway. Their starting center, Nick Trice, and then one of their guards, Sertadrian Brooks. Head coach Terry Gamble says they're both game time decisions. There was no, there was no tears or anything, no surgery required or whatnot. So it's still in play that either one could be there on Saturday, but it's in doubt, as you'd expect. Allen's going to keep that kind of stuff, close to the vest. But it's Allen. Nobody's going to be crying if Allen's going to be down, a couple players because of it's Allen. Right. Their depth is unlike any team in the state, and you kind of saw that against Midway, is that even when those 2 players went out, the offensive line, the quality didn't really drop one bit. I mean, you slot in, Braden Sanders at center and Colton Ellert at guard, and I mean, it was still a clean pocket for Grant Tisdale all afternoon. So the offensive line is still going to be solid, but it's just those incremental differences that could very well prove the difference against a team like Duncanville, because you really do need all the horses that you can have against that defensive line. When you saw them, Justin, obviously Duncanville's defensive line, they get a lot of pressure. Yeah. Is it a symptom of blitzing? Is it just, do they rush the front four? Do you recall how they generated pressure against Lewisville?
It's the front four, but the thing that really impressed me was just the playmaking ability of the secondary.
Yeah.
Like, they don't just cover you. They make plays, and when they make a play, then they're like running backs and receivers with the ball when they get them. Like, I've seen, they have to have had at least like 4 returns of over 50 yards in these playoffs.
Yeah.
I know they had a couple in the Lewisville game. One was like 100 yards. But yeah, the front four just swarming. Like, they're just all over you.
Yeah, I mean, guys like, just some of the guys in the front four of note, Charleston Craddock, DeBraylon Carroll, Kamarja Kenny. I mean, overall, Duncanville has totaled almost 40 sacks this season. And that, I think, is kind of the dicey proposition for Allen, is if not Southlake, but Duncanville is able to get pressure with just their front four, because it allows you to do so much more with your back seven. And, because, I mean, if they're not able to generate steady pressure, Grant Tisdale is he's an efficient enough quarterback to where eventually those receivers, because Allen has this is going to be the best receiving core that Duncanville will have seen, and I'm not just talking
probably the most mobile quarterback that they've seen as well.
Maybe. Yeah, and I think that works both ways too with Allen versus Jaquindon Jackson. But that's the thing with Grant Tisdale. His rushing has become even more of a focus. As the over the last 2 months or so of the season. I mean, he's routinely getting in the the 150 yards a game barometer. But even if he has time to work, I mean, receivers like Theo Weiss, obviously Theo Weiss, one of the best receivers in the country. The Green twins, Bryson and Blaine Green, Jawan Mason, Darian Sherfield. They got a lot. I mean, more weapons than I think any opposing receiving core that that Duncanville secondary will have seen. But you did mention those playmakers, and it's guys like Trayshawn Devons, Stacy Brown, Chris Thompson Jr. That was where a lot of the experience resided in that Duncanville defense, and that was insane too, because you think back to the start of the season, Duncanville's defense returned only 3 starters, and they've had the year that they've had, because it's not a unit that was was forged through just all these battles together and all this veteran experience. No, it's a defense that was, a lot of those guys were playing together on varsity for the very first time this season, and to turn in the year that they have, I mean, it's like I said, it is a defense that is operating at a historic pace and making a very worthy case as being maybe the best defense in the history of at the very least the 6A classification. But then there was also the wrinkle, because while you saw Duncanville putting up these gaudy defensive numbers, you could fall back on we'll look at the schedule. It's not the deepest district and whatnot. But then you see what they've done these last couple weeks of the playoffs against Arlington Lamar, against South Lake Carroll, allowing a combined 13 points against 2 offenses that even after the Duncanville performance rank 3rd and 4th in the area in total offense. And I think that the South Lake performance especially was such an eye-opener, and that's the one that really oh my goodness, they are okay. They are. I don't know if that was just I mean, I guess we'll learn on Saturday if that was just simply kind of a perfect storm, because South Lake did commit 5 turnovers in that game. Very, very un-South Lake-like performance from an efficiency standpoint. If that was just a perfect storm or just an indictment that Duncanville's defense is just that freaking special.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because, we've talked about it so many times. The way that you traditionally beat Allen is you build a big enough advantage in the first half to survive the second half, because they will win the second half. But, kind of like I alluded to, this may be the first time that anybody can employ a different game plan and just shut Allen out. Just not allow them to get rolling on offense, do enough on the offensive side of the ball against them to, if Duncanville leads by 13, 14 points at halftime, is that enough? Just because their defense has been so dominant, especially in the second half. It's an interesting wrinkle, because it's been so traditionally important to punch Allen in the mouth and be up so big at halftime to beat them that may not have to happen Saturday for Duncanville to win.
Offensively, this is a very much strength versus strength. These are the number 1 and number 2 rushing offenses in the Metroplex. Let's see, Duncanville, Allen is at what? Allen, they're both over 300 yards rushing on the season. They're both incredible rushing the football. With Allen, obviously we've mentioned Grant Tisdale. I mean, again, as dominant a dual threat quarterback as there's been in 6A this season, coupled with being maybe the most efficient passer. I mean, it really is kind of a pick your poison in how you handle him. Plus, in the backfield you got guys like Selden Manning and Grant Robinson. I mean, they've got so many ways that they can beat you. Whether it's between that stable of running backs or the talented receivers who we mentioned earlier. I mean, it is an impressive offense, and with Duncanville, I mentioned Jaquindon Jackson. I mean, he is Allen hasn't seen a quarterback quite like that, because not only is he a polished runner, he's a tough player to bring down, much like Tisdale. These two players are very, very similar in just kind of the way that they operate at the quarterback position. With Jackson, that was the one thing that just stuck out about watching the highlights, is just how physical he is when he runs, and how he will just go head on and he will bowl you over. And I mean, he's 6'2", 210 pounds, averages almost 10 yards a carry. So I mean, yeah, tackling is going to be a paramount against a player like that. And he had perhaps his best performance of the season last week against South Lake Carroll. He had 150 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns, in addition to going 11 of 15 passing. I mean, he's dangerous. Allen has not seen a player quite like that yet this season, but the same holds true with Duncanville versus Grant Tisdale and his stable of weapons too. I'm anxious to see who wins the special teams battle? I think
Right.
this, again, you got to dig so deep for that, because even for all the defensive scores that Duncanville has, I mean, they do have, I mean, what did I had it written down? They've let's see, they've got 6 return touchdowns off special teams alone, and you compare that to Allen, which might not have that volume of special teams scores, but they do really excel in using special teams to dictate field position.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say that's another area where Allen always beats you. They always beat you in special teams, especially like you said in field position. It seems like Allen always gets the ball at the 40.
Yeah.
Like it just when you watch Allen play, it's like, oh, they're at the 45 out of nowhere. So it'll be interesting if Duncanville can slow the offense, and then maybe it goes back and forth a little bit if Allen gets taken out of that comfort zone too, because they're used to working with a 70-yard field, a 100-yard field.
I mean, James Griffith, their kicker, does such a good job at pinning these teams just outside the red zone. Not enough teams, I've noticed, not enough teams this year, I don't know if you guys have seen this, teams can call for a fair catch on kickoff returns and get the ball at the 25. I don't see, Allen's one of the few teams that does this. I haven't seen too many, but you had Waco Midway last week that had 3 drives that I believe started inside the 15-yard line just because of Allen's, special teams being so good at tackling, and just little wrinkles like that. And I mean, it really is like Coach Gamble stresses all the time, just making the most of opportunities. It sounds basic, but at the same time, like you look at the Southlake game, and Southlake goes right down the field to begin, then they miss a field goal, and then I mean, you can't let opportunities like that go awry. I don't know. This game this really should be great. What a state semifinal. What a Final Four period between.
Right.
I mean, you have Allen and Duncanville on one end of the bracket. You've got Lake Travis and North Shore on the other end. I mean, 4 teams that you're really expected to kind of be here in the end. You don't have any Cinderella stories.
Yeah, a lot of people I've seen, on Twitter and stuff like that saying this is, maybe the best, 6A Final Four ever. I don't know if that's even that tough of an argument, and maybe just one of the best Final Fours ever. Period. Just the pure talent and dominance that all 4 teams have shown the whole year.
Who do we think's going to win this one?
I took Allen. I mean, I feel like we just spent 25 minutes, elaborating on why Duncanville might win this football game, but at the same time, it's mid-December and Allen's playing in a state semifinal at AT&T Stadium, and it's really hard to go against that. It's really tough to pick against them. Not that, I mean, obviously we wouldn't have sat, here and said all the things we said if we didn't think Duncanville had a legitimate shot at winning this football game. But I think it's just too tough to, it's like the Highland Parks of the world. It's hard to pick against them this time of year, regardless of the circumstances.
Justin?
I'm taking Duncanville.
Okay.
I think the defense will get it done. I don't think they're going to turn the ball over much, and I think they're going to win a pretty low-scoring game. How about 21-20?
21-20?
Score and everything.
Yeah.
Right.
I think this has a chance to be a pretty low-scoring one too. At the very least, if Allen wins, I think it's going to be a low-scoring. Just because they're not going to they might crack the code in the sense that they have a better offensive showing than anybody else has against it. But it's not going to be like they're not going to hang 35 or 38 on them or whatever. So if Allen does win, I foresee this. Yeah, it's going to be like a 24-20 style football game. I think Allen's. I don't make this pick with much confidence. I'm saying this right straight up, but I think Allen is going to squeak out a win. Should be a tough one. I think that, like you said, I kind of default to Allen's big game experience and having players and a coaching staff that is accustomed to, coming through at this juncture of the postseason. I don't know. I want to say, but then I think it's like the Southlake game last week. Southlake came into that game with only 3 turnovers, I think, on the season, and then they commit 5. So I don't know if it was again just maybe the stage was a bit too big for Southlake or whatnot. But I mean, Allen has been. That's like kind of Allen's MO is just efficient, mistake-free football. They're not a team that beats themselves, and it's a trust. It's a vote of confidence in again in Grant Tisdale and just his efficiency and just that they're not going to make the same mistakes. They're not going to commit the turnovers that Duncanville did, and because those things, I mean, that can swing a game just from an emotional standpoint. And I also think it's worth noting just that adversity is going to set in at some point for one, probably both of these teams at some point on Saturday, and I do think it kind of matters that Allen has been through the the fire already against teams like Rockwall and the Woodlands, which gave them, some stiffer challenges than they might have otherwise anticipated. But at the very least, they know how to work through, close quarters, when it gets to crunch time. Duncanville hasn't had to do that yet. They've just beat the brakes off of everybody. And you know what? Maybe that's just an indictment of how good they are.
I was going to say, to their credit, I thought Southlake, I took Southlake last week.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody expected that to be a much better game, and Duncanville just came out and just railroaded them. So, I mean, to their credit, maybe it's, like we always say, you play who's in front of you, but maybe that's, like you said, a message about how good they might actually be.
I won't, balk at anybody who picks either side in this one, though, because you can make great cases for both teams. And you've kind of seen that in just if you read up online, if you listen, there's definitely, despite Allen's stature and, their pedigree as the reigning state champions, ranked, number 1, number 2, whatever, in whatever national poll you see, with what Duncanville did last week against Southlake Carroll, there was a lot of folks who are going to be back in Duncanville in this game. And yeah, again, we're right down to the Final Four. I don't really think there's a whole lot separating these 4 teams from a skill standpoint. It's just, again, it boils down to just the usual cliches of who plays, the most mistake-free football and whatnot. But yeah, I think Allen gets it done, but not by much. I think it's going to be a very, very good game, every bit as good as the hype would anticipate. And this might actually be, at least from a picket line standpoint, the most competitive Allen game that we've ever had.
Yeah.
It is a perfect 3-3 split on the picket line for Allen and Duncanville. Taylor, you and I, as well as Kendrick Johnson, siding with the Eagles. Justin, you, Brian Murphy, Devin Hassan, picking Duncanville. So I hope it's a good one. Hope it lives up to the hype. But it'll be 4 o'clock Saturday out at AT&T Stadium. I will be there. I'll be tweeting out updates. You can follow me along at MWelchSLM. And hoping for a fun one. And that is a look at Allen versus Duncanville, your Class 6A Division I state semifinal. Obviously, though, we can put football on the back burner for at least for a few days and talk a little basketball. Whereas last week we gave some early impressions on the girls basketball scene. Going to shift gears to the boys, and we're going to start by interviewing one of the absolute best basketball players in the country, Little Elm's own RJ Hampton. Brian Murphy had a chance to talk with RJ on his outstanding junior season as well as the Lobos season in general, and we will see what RJ had to say after a word from this sponsor. Let's take a quick break to talk about ATD Painting. Whether it's painting, staining, carpentry, residential, commercial, interior, exterior, ATD Painting has you covered. They have 4 locations in the Metroplex, including Plano and Lewisville. You can call 972-694-8888 for more information, or you can visit their website at atdpainting.com. That is ATD Painting. Check it out to see just how affordable professional painting can be. And now, let's get back to the podcast.
All right, I'm with Little Elm guard RJ Hampton, and RJ, I'm not sure, but I think you have a big decision on your college decision to make right now, or not quite yet?
Not quite yet, but it's coming soon.
Okay. Now you've gotten a lot of offers from a lot of schools. What kind of schools are piquing your interest right now? Throw me a handful of names.
You got Texas, TCU, Michigan, Kansas, Duke, Kentucky, Florida State.
So a lot of schools coming after you. So reason why you're a 5-star recruit, for people that don't know who RJ Hampton is, you're somewhere in the top 10 in the rankings. Well, now, how much do you pay attention to those rankings?
Not much. I might look at them when the day they drop, but then I won't really pay attention to them.
Okay, so you played against another guy a couple weeks ago in the Thanksgiving Hoop Fest in Duncanville, Jalen Green, who's ranked somewhere up there in those ESPN rankings. How much fun was that? How much fun was that Hoop Fest and getting to play against guys like that?
Playing the Hoop Fest is always great. There's been so much talent coming through the Hoop Fest for all these years, and then to finally be able to play in the Hoop Fest at a good time at the premier game, and especially against Jalen Green, it was fun. He's a great player. I played with him for 2 years on USA Basketball, so we know each other well, so it was fun competing.
Now, speaking of another guy who's well known nationally here in the Metroplex, Tyrese Maxey. He's Kentucky signee. Senior over at South Garland. They got a pretty good squad, and you guys are playing them, this Friday. How much are you looking forward to that game and going against him, a team and player that you played against last year at this exact time?
I'm looking forward to a great deal. I was looking forward to it the day after we lost to them last year. We were up by 10 at halftime, and we should have really won that game. So that's been on my calendar for a long time. But it should be fun playing against him. He's a great player, Kentucky signee. top 10 in the country. So, I mean, we're just going to battle it out, and we're going to come up with a win. So.
Now, last year you had a great sophomore season. You're Class 5A Player of the Year. Now, what's kind of your goal for your junior year?
I mean, my freshman year, I had all these accolades individually. We lost in the second round, and then this past year I got 5A Player of the Year, and then we ended up losing the third round. This year, I mean, I've got the individual accolades, and I think this year I just want to win a state championship. I mean, I didn't get Gatorade Player of the Year last year, so that's one of my goals also this year. But just winning, just competing every game, and I think we're going to come out with a state ring.
Now, the past few years you've had a running mate, average upwards of 20-plus points a game with you. Your freshman year you had Devin Pullum. He's playing college basketball now. And then you had Javian Williams last year. He's playing college basketball now. And now this year, Trey White kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Phenomenal freshman. I understand he's ranked, in that freshman class somewhere up there as well. How much fun has it been playing alongside a young freshman who's highly talented like yourself?
Yeah, it's been fun playing with Trey. He's a great talent. Freshman, like you said. It's just been real fun to play with him. He's got all the tools. He has the perfect body, the perfect frame, just to be great. So it's been real good playing with him. He helps me out a lot on offense and defense. So when we're clicking together, it's really hard to beat us.
Now, when did you kind of meet him? When did you realize that he was coming to Little? Did you know who he was before coming to Little Elm?
Oh yeah, for sure. I've known Trey since he was probably in the 6th grade.
Okay.
I've known Trey all throughout middle school, and he went to Prestonwood Academy in middle school, and then one day he just texted me. He was like, "Hey, I just moved to Little Elm." And I was like, I guess we got something cooking. Okay,
now how excited were you when you got that text? Did it come out of the blue? Were you surprised? Because he's from around this area also, Little Elm, yeah.
So yeah, I was surprised when he texted me and told me that. I mean, I can remember I was texting Devin one day, my freshman year, right before my freshman year. I was like, hey, I just moved to Little Elm. And he was like, same thing. Like, we're cooking now.
So it's like the tables have turned.
Yeah.
You were Trey White when you were a freshman, and Devin was you, and then now you're interesting. All right, well, thanks, RJ.
Thanks again to RJ Hampton for taking the time to chat with Brian for our Student Athlete Spotlight. And with that, let's talk a little boys hoops. For some districts are already underway, like the Frisco district. Some begin this Friday, like some of the Lewisville ISD districts. And then you got Allen and Plano's district, which starts next week. So let's just some early observations on just what we've seen out of some of our boys basketball markets. Obviously, we won't touch on everybody. We only got so much time to fill, and we've got all season to get to that. So nevertheless, we were just kind of building off of RJ and Little Elm. I mean, if you're just looking at a district at the 5A level that you can make a case might be the most top-heavy in terms of just quality of teams. Yeah. I mean, 8-5A is pretty salty when you look at the power trio of Justin Northwest, Little Elm, and the Colony. The Colony, which worked its way into the top 10 of the Texas Association of Basketball Coach state rankings. Yeah. I mean, are you surprised by this at all, Justin? Just what do you make of the Cougars and their hot start?
I'm a little surprised because they lost some key pieces from last year, in particular Khalil Spear, who kind of did a lot of different things for them and was a leader. So I'm kind of surprised a little bit by the start, but not too much. There's obviously a really good team. They gave Little Elm a good game last year, made the playoffs. So good senior leadership with Bryce Okpo, Luis Rodriguez, Garen Davis coming back. So I'm not too surprised. Just looks like this is going to be a really good district. I know coming into the year, I think the coaches picked Dan Ryan to actually finish third ahead of the Colony. So, okay. Obviously, there's talent there if teams are picking them ahead, and then obviously we know about Justin Northwest and Little Elm. But the Colony looking pretty good. They have Tay Mosier. He's a sophomore, played some varsity minutes as a freshman last year, so he's a pretty good outside shooter, does a little bit of everything. They get Keith Miller back, obviously the Texas Tech commit in football.
Absolutely.
So very good athlete there. And then, as I mentioned, those kind of seniors they have returning, along with another sophomore that Coach Ryan said's given nice contributions, Sean Matthew. So, Coach Ryan seems to like the depth they have over there, and obviously the experience. And it's a team that can score in different ways. They have some shooters that can get up and down, but I think this is a team that's really going to hang their hat on their defense, and that starts with Okpo. He's Defensive Player of the Year all the way back when he was a sophomore. His offensive game has continued to evolve, but defensively he's one of the better players in the area there, and I think that kind of That's where it starts for the Colony.
Curious to see if they can wedge their way into what was kind of perceived as a two-horse race for that top spot between Northwest and the Colony. Obviously, Northwest, the state runner-up last year, and they've got, perhaps their, 3 of their 4 best players or so back with Avery Anderson, Sammy Freeman, and Julian Smith. I mean, we expect them to be in the thick of things right until the very end. Little Elm's always going to be fascinating to monitor because they have one of the most electrifying players in the entire country in RJ Hampton, and he is, he's doing RJ things once again this season. He's already got a 40-point game under his belt.
I was there at that one.
You saw him against Hebron doing his thing. As always, though, it's just going to be a question of where else does the scoring come from, and they do have a standout freshman this year named Trey White, who is turned some heads early on. Brian Murphy saying, he is a highly regarded prospect despite just being a freshman. And he's had some games where he's got up into that the high 20s, 30 barometer. I mean, he can fill it up. He does not play like a normal freshman. He has a far more polished offensive game than a normal freshman. Not definitely a much more athletic player than you see at the freshman level. But he's going to go through the expected freshman up and downs and whatnot, and that will just kind of ultimately dictate. I think that'll kind of honestly depend more because once you get into the playoffs, you know what you're going to get out of RJ. But when you run into these teams that are perhaps a bit deeper than Little Elm and have a bit more of a scoring punch beyond their go-to guy, it's just going to depend on where the offense comes from beyond him. But as long as you have RJ Hampton, you get a fighting chance against pretty much anybody. Let's see. You wanted to throw out a note on Lake Dallas, though, as we're talking 8-5A?
Sure. I mean, we can mention obviously an uphill road for basically any team outside that top 3 in that district. As you mentioned, super top heavy. Lake Dallas, they're going to have to fight through some size. They're pretty small overall, and with that, they've kind of gone to an NBA style approach, I guess if you want to call it that way, an analytical approach. They're literally all shots from the outside or in the paint, and obviously they have Austin Shepard back as their leader. Likes to mix it up, likes to drive the rim and score inside. But outside of that, it's literally fast paced. They do full scale line changes all the time, which is kind of unusual. I mean, it's interesting to watch because literally it's 5 for 5 almost every time they sub. They play aggressive defense, but their game is really predicated on being able to shoot from outside. And Yash Matu, Sean Woodson, they have guys that can shoot from outside and score that way, but they're really going to live and die by whether or not they can do it on any given night. Because I saw them play McKinney Christian, they had 14 made threes in the first half. So, I mean, if you do that, in theory, you can play with anybody, but that's a pretty unstable way to go about things night in and night out. So we'll see. I mean, who knows? Maybe they'll jump up and play spoiler a couple times, but tough league to crack the top 4 for sure.
Nice to see Daryl Morey's influence trickling down to the high school level. Over in let's talk a little District 9-6A. Just a couple things on District 9-6A. I'd say the biggest thing that's jumped out just in the few weeks that we've been digging our toes into boys basketball has been that Allen hasn't really lost a step despite graduating 4 starters, despite a new head coach, albeit a former assistant in Joe McCullough. Allen's still really freaking good at basketball, and so much so that they're ranked number 2 in the state right now. I'm not sure at the start of the year if I would have envisioned them being, number 2 in the state heading into district play. And after watching them against the number 1 team, Denton Geyer, that doesn't feel like a fluke at all. Like, they were in position to beat Geyer. If they could have made 1 free throw with 3 seconds left in that game, they end up losing in overtime by 3 points at Geyer. And this is a Geyer team that returns, Davion Harmon, Jalen Wilson, Jacoby Coles, its usual star-studded lineup, and Allen matched them step for step. They didn't have to, junk it up like they had to do last year in the regional finals. They played them in a track meet, and they were, for most of the game, they looked every bit the equal of what is right now the number 1 ranked team in the state. It's a different Allen team, and like I said, they graduated 4 starters. You have only Isaiah Stevens being the lone returning starter on that team. Plus, 6-man Corey Jones is now starting, and it's a young team too. And that's the thing. Like, that was kind of the big takeaway from the Geyer game, is that even though they lost, like, this Allen team was what they are right now. It feels like a team that does have a lot of room to grow just because of how young and new most of that rotation is to the varsity level. Players like Tylen Elder, Bryce Kennedy, Manny Obaseki, who played a little bit of time on varsity early last year. Just guys that are just going to keep getting better as the season progresses. It is a really interesting team. They maybe don't have, like, haven't shot yet quite as well as they could. That last year's team could knock down 15 to 20 23s in a game. Sometimes it felt like if they were hot enough. I mean, this team is, they still have 5 guys, on the court at all times that can space the floor, but they make up for it by being probably a bit more overly athletic than last year's team was. They got some guys that can leap. Like, if you're just even watching layup lines, I mean, that's exciting just because of the kinds of dunks those guys can throw down. I mean, it's a different team in some respects. They still don't have a true post, which is been the case ever since pretty much since they had Jamoni McNeese now balling up at OU. They're 6'10" center back when they went to state, back in 2014. Ever since, I mean, they have a lot of guys that are anywhere from 6'2" to 6'6" that can all play different positions, very similar to last year's team and kind of the versatility that they provide. So teams like like Jesuit and their big man Julius Marble, you could see that posing some fits. The 2 games that I've seen Allen, the Jacoby Coles and with Geyer, and then DeSoto's big man. They'll give up an offensive rebound on you, but I mean, it's still a team that gets up and down, plays the kind of ball that they've been accustomed to under Jeff McCullough, who's former head coach. Now it's being run by his brother Joe McCullough. And yeah, they've only lost 1 game. Is that Geyer? And yeah, I mean, they look the part. They're right now. It's them and Jesuit appear to be the 2 front runners in this district, and should be a fun ride though. But yes, Allen, despite all that they lost from last year, still really good at basketball.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess if you want to talk 9-6A, the team, the opposite of that, the team that lost arguably the least, and I think maybe not even arguably, is Plano West. Yep. And been a little bit, I don't want to say a slow start, a little bit probably more up and down than they would expect, but, they just have so much depth. It was a rare down year for them with some injuries that caused them to miss the playoffs and stumble down the stretch, but they bring everybody back. Yeah. Ryan Zambi, little brother Alex Zambi, who, was a superlative winner as a freshman last year, Shamar Pearl, Christian Green, only a sophomore, Christian Aguilar. It's up and down. They have everybody back, and there's no reason that they shouldn't be a postseason team underneath. I think we all pretty much had them at 3 or 4 when we were talking about it, so we'll see. It's the opposite story over at East, so it's going to be, I think, a better year for East under new head coach Matt Wester. It's an interesting case over there, because the one thing that Wester's really said about them is that they basically brought up the majority of the JV team after graduating and losing everybody. And it's actually kind of worked out in the early going. They had the impressive upset of Morton Ranch on the last second shot, but there's a lot of youth, but it's youth that's accustomed to winning. So it could be a situation where, I don't think they're a playoff team, but I don't think they're a winless team either. So, I mean, that's a step in the right direction under Wester's first year. So we'll see those PISD schools, but West should certainly have a better season, bringing literally everybody back and achieve more on par with the talent that they have than they did last year.
Justin, over in District 6-6A with Lewisville ISD and Coppell, what are before we get out of here, what are some initial impressions of what you've seen there?
Well, I guess for starters, the first thing I want to mention, we've kind of mentioned this when we started talking basketball a little bit before, but it's just really odd to cover a district and 5 teams in the district, and 4 of them have new head coaches. So
wow,
it's definitely a change. Kind of seeing how these styles may change and stuff. Obviously, I haven't got to see all these teams in person yet, but intrigued to see how the coaching changes play out, and then some young talent that's kind of making some headlines in this district, but. I think this is an underrated district. I was looking at the preseason rankings and stuff. Nobody in the district is ranked from this district. I think a couple teams are going to get up there. You already saw Hebron, earn a win over Little Elm. Yeah. Hebron goes to Little Elm. They don't have Trajan Bridges or Darius Snow, 2 of their key players for basketball. Yep. So they go on the road to Little Elm in a game in which RJ scores his season high in points. I believe it's still a season high, 43. And they go over there and beat them, and they pretty much led wire to wire. I know Little Elm, RJ Hampton went crazy in the third quarter, and Little Elm got a lead for just a second. But Hebron pretty much controlled that game. Evan Anderson and Logan McLaughlin were awesome. McLaughlin is a pure shooter, but he's got a little more hops than I thought. You see him on Twitter throwing down some nice dunks, and then Evan Anderson just got the Arkansas Fort Bend commitment. So those 2 are playing well, and once they incorporate those football guys, not sure how long Bridges is going to be around before he goes to Oklahoma. But he has been out there the last few games. So I like the way this Hebron team's shaping up. Obviously, they've won the district the last 2 years and then were eliminated in the first round of the playoffs. So they have plenty of motivation to get back to the playoffs and try to pick up a win this year in the first year under head coach Eric Ryle, who was a longtime assistant under former coach Mark Bishop. So the other team that's really kind of turned my head early is Lewisville.
Yes.
the Farmers have a couple good backcourt players in O.C. Gertman and Kylan Green, who was awesome last year as a freshman, just has a really good feel for the game at the point guard spot. But it's two newcomers that have changed things over there for the Farmers under new head coach Brian Miller, and that's KJ Pruitt, who is a Little Elm transfer. He's a junior guard. He's been picking up some college offers lately. And then before the season started, one of my sources, somebody very familiar with Lewisville basketball and quality basketball in the Metroplex, told me that there's a freshman at Lewisville that has NBA potential all over him. So of course I go to Instagram and Twitter and try to see what I can on. We're talking about. Sorry, blanking on the name.
No, Keontae George.
Brain fart. Keontae George.
Yeah.
6'4" guard, just looks super smooth if you see his highlight reels. He had one, I think I showed you, where he went behind his back, step back three, and he comes out, scores 31 points the first game in a big victory over Bowie. I think they won by 25. He's had 3 games of 28 or more. He's pretty much hitting 20 every game. He looks like the real deal and looks like he's probably one of the premier freshmen in the area, and I think a guy that you're going to be hearing a lot of over the next 4 years. And then with him and Pruitt, those 4 guards, this is a pretty athletic group. They should be able to get up and down. They're off to a 13-2 start, and I think they're going to be right in the hunt for that district title too. And then not really sure to make of Marcus. They pretty much lost everybody. They had Zach Meyer. He was a second-team All-District player from last year back, but outside of him, not much experience. I think they're going to have a good team that works well together and is competitive, but I don't know that they have the firepower that some of these other programs in 6-6A have. And then looking at Coppell, they gotta be thinking what could have been. They have Quavian Adger, who all-district player last year as a sophomore and freshman, I believe. He transfers to this new I school in Lewisville. Then they're expecting, good things from KJ Liggins, but he gets hurt in football, so he's not playing for the whole basketball season. So before the season starts, if you go back to when Clint Schnell inherited the program from Kit Pale last year when he took a AD position, quite possibly maybe 2 of their 3 best players weren't even there for the start of the season. So now they're looking to Tariq Amon and company. They've had some nice results. They played Rockwall Heath 5. They played South Garland twice, and they weren't exactly down to the wire, but they didn't get blown out either. So I think this is going to be a competitive district and should be a good race for these 4 spots. I'm not really sure what the Irving schools had, but I did see Nimitz was kind of picked to make the playoffs, so I'm guessing they have some talent over there. But should be a pretty fun, competitive race.
Awesome. And that is an early look at what to expect out of just a few of our markets with boys basketball district play creeping.
How can I forget
the Caleb Lohner show?
Flower Mound, another team that had a great season last year. I think 5 teams. Sometimes I forget which ones I've already talked about. But obviously Caleb Lohner. If you're not talking RJ Hampton, he might be the next best junior recruit in the area. He's keeps climbing. He's up in the 30s now. He's getting lots of looks. Does it all offensively. Nice hops, smooth shot, and he really attacks the offensive glass too. And Coach Littleton seems to be very pleased with how he's coming along defensively. Kind of like Marcus, the issue with Flower Mound is they lost a ton, and they lost pretty much all of their size.
Really? So
they have Lohner back, and they have Jeffrey Mills, and other than that, it's a bunch of new characters, but it's going to be the same Flower Mound. They're going to rattle you with their matchup zone and kind of throw you in whack, and then they're going to let it fly. I believe this year they're going with the Tsunami. Okay. But it's the same Flower Mound, get an open 3, let it fly, and they're going to make their fair share and be in ball games and come back. So expect those 3 teams to really be up for those Hebron, Lewisville, and Flower Mound being that contention for that district title.
Awesome. And that will conclude this edition of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. We will be back on Monday to recap Allen and Duncanville. Plus, we'll talk a little bit more hoops for next week. And in the meantime, folks, that'll do it. Taylor, Justin, appreciate you for tagging along. Folks, you enjoy the rest of your week, and we will talk to y'all later. Thanks for checking out this edition of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast, brought to you by Performance Food Group. They deliver more than 150,000 food and related products to customers all across the country. Their McKinney office is currently hiring Class A CDL drivers, order selectors, and many other entry and part-time positions. For more information, you can visit their website at pfgc.com/careers, or you can call 214-491-3130. That is Performance Food Group, located in McKinney at 500 Metro Park Drive.